90% of high-performing individuals attribute their success to clarity of purpose, yet most people drift through life reacting instead of deciding. Power doesn't start when the world recognizes you. It starts long before that, in the quiet, unseen moments where you decide who you are without needing approval. Inner clarity is not something you stumble upon. It is something you build with intention, through discipline, through honesty, and through the courage to face yourself without filters. Most people spend their lives chasing outcomes, but those with real power focus on alignment. They don't ask, what should I do? They ask, who must I become to live a life that actually means something? Clarity demands confrontation. It forces you to question the roles you've been playing, the expectations you've been carrying, and the identities you've borrowed from others just to feel accepted. It strips away illusions, and that process is uncomfortable because it reveals how much of your life may have been shaped by fear rather than truth. But that discomfort is not a sign you're lost. It's proof you're finally paying attention, because the moment you stop lying to yourself is the moment your power begins to return. When you are clear within, your decisions become sharper. You stop hesitating. You stop second-guessing every move. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become anchored. You know what aligns and what doesn't. You recognize distractions for what they are. Temporary noise trying to pull you away from something meaningful. And instead of reacting emotionally to every situation, you respond with purpose. That's the difference between someone who is controlled by circumstances and someone who creates direction, regardless of them. Inner clarity also changes how you deal with people. You no longer chase connections that drain you or shrink yourself to fit into spaces that don't respect your presence. You begin to understand that not everyone is meant to stay, and not every opportunity is meant to be taken. That realization doesn't make you cold, it makes you focused. Because every yes you give to the wrong thing is a no to something that actually matters. And powerful individuals are extremely careful about where their energy goes. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing yourself. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't compete for attention. It simply exists. And people can feel it. It shows in the way you walk into a room without needing validation. It shows in the way you listen more than you speak. Not because you're unsure, but because you're observant. It shows in the way you handle pressure, not with panic, but with control. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It is built from clarity. Without clarity, everything feels urgent. Every opinion feels important. Every setback feels personal. But with clarity, you gain perspective. You understand that not every battle deserves your energy. You learn to prioritize what truly matters instead of being consumed by what doesn't. And that shift alone changes everything. Because energy, once focused, becomes force. And force, when directed with purpose, becomes power. The truth is, most people are not lacking talent or opportunity. They are lacking direction. They are moving fast, but going nowhere. They are busy, but not effective. And the reason is simple. They haven't taken the time to define what actually matters to them. They are living by default instead of by design. But the moment you choose clarity, everything changes. Your standards rise, your mindset sharpens, your actions align, and suddenly you're no longer reacting to life, you're leading it. Clarity is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and being brave enough to accept the truth even when it's inconvenient. It's about stripping away everything that isn't real until all that remains is something solid, something unshakable, something that belongs to you and no one else. And from that place, decisions stop feeling heavy because they are rooted in something deeper than fear. That's where real power lives, not in external validation, not in temporary success, but in the unshakable understanding of who you are and what you stand for. Because once you have that, the world doesn't decide your direction anymore. UDA studies show that people who pause before responding are perceived as 40 more intelligent and emotionally controlled, yet most react within seconds and lose their power. Silence is often misunderstood because we live in a world that rewards noise. People are taught that being loud means being confident, that speaking more means having more value, and that reacting quickly shows strength. But real power doesn't rush to be heard. It waits, it observes, it chooses. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is the discipline of it. And those who understand this don't waste their energy trying to prove themselves in every moment. When you master silence, you gain control over situations that would otherwise control you. Most people react instantly. They let emotions take over, words spill out, and decisions get made in the heat of the moment. But reaction is easy. Anyone can react. Strategy, however, requires restraint. It requires the ability to feel everything and still choose what deserves a response. That pause, that space between stimulus and reaction, is where power is built. Silence allows you to see what others miss. When you're not focused on speaking, you're focused on understanding. You notice tone, intention, inconsistency. You read between the lines, and in doing so, you gather information that others give away freely while they are busy talking. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the one who listens becomes the one who leads. Because insight doesn't come from constant expression, it comes from intentional observation. There is also a level of emotional control that comes with silence. It doesn't mean you don't feel, it means you don't let what you feel control your actions. Powerful individuals don't suppress emotions, they manage them. They understand that not every feeling deserves immediate expression. Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Because when you refuse to react impulsively, you deny others the power to manipulate your state. Silence also protects your energy. Words are powerful, but they are also costly. Every argument you engage in, every unnecessary explanation you give, every moment you spend trying to convince someone who has already decided not to understand, it drains you. And powerful people are very selective about where they invest their energy. They don't feel the need to correct every misconception or win every disagreement. They understand that peace is more valuable than proving a point. There is strength in walking away without explaining yourself. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your reasons, or your truth. And the moment you stop over-explaining is the moment you reclaim your authority. Because over-explanation often comes from a need for validation. Silence, on the other hand, comes from certainty. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need to convince you. Silence also creates presence. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. People listen differently, they pay attention, because you're not speaking to fill space, you're speaking to add value. And that distinction changes how you are perceived. It shifts you from being just another voice in the room to being someone whose voice matters. Because power is not in the volume, it's in the intention behind what is said and what is left unsaid. It's important to understand that silence is not avoidance. It's not about running away from difficult conversations or suppressing your truth. It's about choosing the right moment, the right words, and the right energy. It's about knowing when to engage and when to disengage. Because not every situation deserves your voice, and not every person deserves your explanation. And recognizing that is a form of intelligence most people never develop. When you operate from silence, you become unpredictable in a powerful way. People cannot easily read your next move. They cannot manipulate your reactions. And that uncertainty gives you an advantage, because while others are busy revealing everything, you are choosing what to reveal and when. That level of control shifts the dynamic in any environment. In the end, silence is not about saying nothing. It's about saying only what matters. It's about understanding that your energy, your words, and your presence are valuable resources, and instead of spending them freely, you invest them wisely. Because the less you react, the more you observe. The more you observe, the more you understand. And the more you understand, the more power you hold. Research shows that individuals with clearly defined personal boundaries experience up to 60 lower stress levels, yet most people avoid setting them out of fear of rejection. Boundaries are not barriers. They are declarations. They are the invisible lines that communicate to the world what is acceptable and what is not. And the truth is, people don't cross boundaries because they are unaware. They cross them because they were never clearly set. A woman who understands her worth does not wait for respect to be given. She defines the terms of how she will be treated long before anyone gets close enough to test them. Most people confuse boundaries with selfishness. They believe that saying no will push people away, that protecting their time will make them seem distant, that choosing themselves will cost them connection. But the reality is the opposite. When you lack boundaries, you don't create deeper relationships. You create imbalanced ones. You teach people that your needs are negotiable, that your time is flexible, that your energy is available on demand. And over time, that silent permission turns into silent resentment. Setting boundaries requires courage because it forces you to risk being misunderstood. Not everyone will agree with your limits. Not everyone will respect your decisions immediately. Some will question you. Some will resist. And some will walk away. But that is not loss. That is clarity. Because anyone who only values you when you have no limits never valued you in the first place. Boundaries don't push the right people away, they reveal who was never aligned to begin with. There is a quiet strength in saying no without explanation. It is one of the purest forms of self-respect. You don't need to justify why something doesn't sit right with you. You don't need to over-explain why your time is valuable or why your peace matters. When you start explaining too much, You begin negotiating with your own standards. And powerful individuals don't negotiate their worth, they embody it. Boundaries also protect your mental and emotional energy. Every time you say yes to something that drains you, you are saying no to something that could build you. And over time, those small compromises accumulate. They weaken your focus. They dilute your purpose. They pull you away from the life you're trying to create. But when your boundaries are clear, your decisions become easier. You no longer waste time debating what feels wrong. You simply recognize it and step away. There is also a level of consistency required when it comes to boundaries. It's not enough to set them once. You must reinforce them through your actions. Because people don't learn from what you say, they learn from what you tolerate. If you allow behavior once, you set a precedent. And if you keep adjusting your limits to keep others comfortable, you slowly abandon yourself in the process. True power comes from holding your standards even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you something in the short term. Boundaries redefine your relationships. They shift the dynamic from obligation to respect. When people know where you stand, they either meet you at that level or remove themselves. And that clarity creates healthier connections. Because real relationships are not built on constant availability, they are built on mutual understanding. And understanding begins with honesty about what you will and will not accept. There is also a deep sense of peace that comes from living within your own limits. You stop feeling overwhelmed by commitments you never wanted. You stop carrying emotional weight that was never yours to hold. You stop trying to fix, please, and accommodate everyone around you. And in that space, you begin to reconnect with yourself. You begin to move with intention instead of obligation. And that shift changes how you experience everything. The truth is, your boundaries are a reflection of how you see yourself. If you don't value your time, others won't. If you don't protect your energy, others will consume it. If you don't define your worth, the world will define it for you, and it will almost always set it lower than you deserve. But the moment you decide that your peace is non-negotiable, everything begins to change. Your standards rise, your environment shifts, your presence becomes stronger, because in the end, boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about honoring yourself. They are about making a decision that your time, your energy, and your well-being are not things to be negotiated or compromised for temporary approval. And once that decision is made, you stop shrinking to fit into spaces that cannot hold your value. You rise beyond them. Studies reveal that individuals with high emotional control outperform others by up to 58% in leadership and decision-making. Yet most people let momentary emotions dictate lifelong outcomes. Emotional control is not about becoming cold, distant, or unfeeling. It is about mastering the space between what you feel and how you choose to act. Most people live at the mercy of their emotions. They react instantly, speak impulsively, and allow temporary feelings to create permanent consequences. But a woman with true power understands something different. Emotions are signals, not commands. They are meant to be understood, not obeyed without question. There is strength in feeling deeply, but there is even greater strength in not being ruled by those feelings. Because emotions, while real, are often fleeting. They rise, they peak, and they pass. But the decisions made in those moments can last far longer, and that is where emotional control becomes a superpower. It gives you the ability to pause, to step back, and to ask yourself whether what you are about to say or do aligns with who you truly are, or if it is simply a reaction to what you are feeling in that moment. Most people confuse intensity with authenticity. They believe that expressing every emotion instantly is a sign of honesty. But uncontrolled expression is not authenticity, it is a lack of discipline. Real authenticity comes from alignment. It comes from choosing responses that reflect your values, not just your impulses. And that requires awareness. It requires the ability to recognize what you are feeling without becoming consumed by it. Emotional control also protects your peace. When you are easily triggered, you become easy to control. Anyone can disrupt your focus. Anyone can shift your mood. Anyone can pull you into unnecessary conflict. But when you are grounded, when you are centered, when you are in control of your internal state, you become unshakable. Situations may change, people may challenge you, but your response remains intentional. And that consistency creates stability in a world that is often unpredictable. There is also a level of power in restraint. Not every emotion needs to be displayed. Not every frustration needs to be expressed. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is hold your composure when everything within you wants to react, because in that moment you are not suppressing your emotions, you are directing them. You are choosing to respond in a way that serves you rather than in a way that simply releases tension. Emotional control sharpens your decision making. When you are not clouded by anger, fear, or insecurity, you see situations more clearly. You evaluate options more rationally. You act with purpose instead of pressure. And that clarity gives you an advantage, because while others are reacting emotionally, you are responding strategically. You are thinking beyond the moment. You are considering the long-term impact instead of being consumed by short-term feelings. It also changes how others perceive you. People trust those who are stable, those who remain composed under pressure, those who do not shift with every emotional wave. Your presence becomes calming, your words carry more weight, because others can sense that you are not driven by impulse, you are guided by intention. And that kind of energy naturally commands respect. But emotional control is not something that happens overnight. It is built through practice, through moments where you choose silence over reaction, through moments where you choose understanding over assumption, through moments where you choose patience over urgency. Each of those decisions strengthens your ability to stay grounded. Each of those moments reinforces your discipline. The truth is, life will always present situations that test your emotions. There will always be moments that frustrate you, challenge you, and push your limits. But those moments are not there to break you. They are there to reveal how much control you truly have. And every time you choose to respond with awareness instead of impulse, you reclaim a piece of your power. Because emotional control is not about avoiding emotions, it is about owning them without letting them own you. It is about understanding that your feelings are valid, but they are not always accurate. And when you learn to separate the two, you begin to operate from a place of clarity instead of chaos, from a place of strength instead of reaction, from a place where your actions are defined not by what you feel in the moment, but by who you have decided to become. A research indicates that people form lasting impressions within the first 7 seconds, yet those with true presence influence perception without saying a single word. There is a difference between being noticed and being remembered. Attention is loud, temporary, and often forced. Presence is quiet, lasting, and undeniable. Most people chase attention because they believe visibility equals value. They try to stand out by speaking more, showing more, proving more. But a woman who understands her power moves differently. She doesn't chase the spotlight, she becomes the reason the room shifts when she enters. Presence begins long before words are spoken. It is built in the way you carry yourself, the way you hold your posture, the way your energy settles into a space without needing permission. There is a calm certainty in it. No rush, no need to impress, no urgency to be validated. And that calmness creates a contrast in a world filled with noise. Because when everyone else is trying to be seen, the one who is grounded naturally stands out. People who command presence understand that energy speaks first. Before a single word is exchanged, something is already being communicated. Confidence, insecurity, intention, awareness, it all shows. And the difference is not in how much is expressed, but in how aligned it is. When someone is secure within themselves, it reflects outwardly. It shows in their stillness, in their eye contact, in their ability to be fully present without distraction. There is also restraint in presence. Not everything needs to be shared, not every thought needs to be spoken. When you speak less, your words carry weight. People listen differently because they know you are not speaking to fill silence. You are speaking to add meaning. And that distinction changes how you are perceived. It shifts you from being just another voice to being someone whose voice holds value. Presence is not about perfection, it is about authenticity without insecurity. It is about being comfortable in your own skin without constantly seeking approval. Most people dilute their presence by trying to adapt to every environment, by adjusting themselves to fit expectations, by becoming what they think others want to see. But in doing so, they lose the very thing that makes them impactful. Because real presence comes from consistency, from showing up as who you are, not who you think you need to be. There is a quiet power in not reacting to everything around you, in not feeling the need to insert yourself into every conversation, in not competing for attention. Because when you are secure, you don't need to prove your worth in every moment. You allow your presence to speak for itself. And ironically, that's what draws people in. Because authenticity is rare, and people are naturally drawn to what feels real. Presence also comes from awareness, being fully engaged in the moment. Listening without distraction, observing without judgment. Most people are physically present but mentally elsewhere. They are thinking about what to say next, how they are being perceived, or what they need to prove. But when you are truly present, you remove that noise. You focus on what is in front of you, and that level of attention creates connection. It makes others feel seen, heard, and understood, and that is a form of influence that goes far beyond words. There is also discipline behind presence. It requires self-control, emotional stability, and clarity of identity. Because without those, it becomes easy to seek external validation. It becomes easy to fall into the habit of over-explaining, oversharing, over-performing. But when you know who you are, you don't feel the need to constantly reinforce it. You trust it, and that trust creates a natural confidence that others can feel. The truth is, attention fades quickly. It is dependent on trends, on noise, on constant effort. But presence endures. It stays with people long after you leave the room. It is remembered not because it demanded to be noticed, but because it was impossible to ignore. And that is the difference. One seeks validation, the other reflects self-assurance. Because in the end, commanding presence is not about doing more, it is about needing less. Less approval, less validation, less noise. And in that space, what remains is something powerful, something grounded, something that doesn't have. Chase attention to be recognized. It simply exists. And that existence alone creates impact. Psychological studies suggest that over 70% of people delay moving on because they wait for closure that never comes, while those who self-create closure recover faster and regain emotional control. Walking away without needing closure is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. Most people believe closure is something that must be given, something that comes from a final conversation, a clear explanation, or an apology that makes everything make sense. But the truth is, closure is rarely delivered in a perfect, satisfying way. It is often delayed, incomplete, or completely absent. And those who depend on it remain stuck, waiting for something outside of their control to give them permission to move forward. A woman with power understands something different. She knows that closure is not something she waits for, it is something she creates. It comes from acceptance, not explanation. It comes from recognizing that not every situation will provide answers, and not every person will offer understanding. And instead of chasing those answers, she chooses peace. Because she realizes that the longer she waits for clarity from others, the longer she postpones her own growth. There is strength in letting go without knowing everything, in choosing to move forward even when questions remain unanswered. Because the need for closure is often rooted in the desire for certainty, for validation, for a sense that what happened had meaning. But life does not always provide that clarity. And the more you chase it, the more you keep yourself tied to something that is already over. Walking away then becomes an act of self-respect. It is the decision to stop investing energy into something that no longer serves you. Most people stay longer than they should because they are waiting for a final moment that will justify their decision to leave. They want confirmation that they tried enough, that they were right, that their feelings were valid, but that confirmation rarely arrives in a clean, satisfying way. And so they remain in situations that drain them, hoping for a resolution that never comes. But powerful individuals don't wait for perfect endings. They recognize when something is no longer aligned, and they act on that awareness. Walking away without closure also requires emotional discipline. It means resisting the urge to go back for one more conversation, one more explanation, one more attempt to fix what is already broken. It means accepting that some things cannot be repaired, not because you didn't try, but because they were never meant to last. And that acceptance is not weakness, it is clarity. It is the understanding that your energy is better invested in moving forward than in revisiting what has already ended. There is also a sense of freedom that comes with self-created closure. When you stop waiting for someone else to give you answers, you reclaim control over your own narrative. You decide what the experience meant. You decide what you learned. You decide how it shapes you moving forward. And that shift changes everything. Because instead of being defined by what happened to you, you become defined by how you choose to move beyond it. Walking away without closure also protects your peace. Not every conversation brings resolution. Sometimes it brings more confusion, more emotion, more questions. And by choosing not to engage, you protect yourself from being pulled back into a cycle that no longer serves you. You create space to heal, to reflect, to grow. And in that space, you begin to rebuild your sense of self without the influence of something that was holding you back. It is important to understand that closure is not about forgetting or pretending something didn't matter. It is about accepting that it did matter, but it no longer defines your present or your future. It is about honoring the experience without allowing it to control you. And that requires strength. Because it is easier to hold on, to revisit, to replay. But growth demands release. The truth is, not every chapter in life ends with a clear conclusion. Some end abruptly, some end without explanation, some end in ways that feel unfinished. But waiting for those endings to make sense only keeps you stuck in a place you have already outgrown. Walking away without closure is the decision to stop waiting for clarity and start creating it within yourself. Because in the end, closure is not something you receive, it is something you decide. It is the moment you accept what is, release what was, and choose what comes next. And that decision does not require permission, explanation, or validation. It requires only one thing: the willingness to move forward without looking back, trusting that your peace is more valuable than any answer you were hoping to find.